Gentlemen.
Behold.
Evening.
There it is. Oh, sometimes it's just refreshing to be with you both. Because I can say something like that and get an easy laugh. Whereas walking down the boulevard, which I don't do because there's nowhere to walk to, but, that joke wouldn't land.
Say it's tough to walk in suburbia.
Welcome to episode 105. I remember because 104 is still on my desktop.
Easy reference.
Solid.
I don't know why I haven't been doing that. Oh, it's been a weekend of highs and lows, gentlemen. I'm Andrew. JJ's here.
Hello.
And there's Michael.
Hi, friends.
And we're back for another episode of We Were Gamers, a podcast about how there's really, honestly, no time to game, so you get to hear all the stories about the little bit of time we did have to do it.
Yeah, that's a pretty fair description.
That's I don't know. I didn't know if it came out making sense, but it made sense in my brain. The way that I don't know.
Yep. Sometimes we got to fit in the gaming where we can, even if that means in the middle of the night.
In the middle of the night. We could start with one of the highs from this past weekend.
Sure.
Because I've got a lot. It's a peaks and valleys kind of day. Month. No, not month. Just the last 4 days. Just peaks and valleys.
So like a week.
I had peaks and valleys in 7 hours with Michael here. And when he's referencing game night. We had a game night.
Yeah, and we're still on speaking terms.
So
we'll get to that.
So no one played Risk. That's good.
But I was the victim. I was the victim of a crime, JJ.
Oh, I see.
It's perpetrated by the other end of this podcast. We had a marathon session of 4 of us got together. Shout out to Eric and Andrew and Michael and I got together for a 7-hour Relic game.
Oh, man. Okay. Let's say that for the sake of the podcast listeners, let's explain what Relic is a little bit.
Absolutely. We've talked about Talisman on this before. Talisman is the originator of Relic, and it's a board game version, left and right movement on squares, reimagining of D&D, kind of.
Yeah, that is a pretty fair description.
Okay. So Relic is a updated, reskinned, and redesigned version of that game within the Warhammer 40,000 from Games Workshop universe, also known as 40K. Space Marines, Inquisitors, Imperial Guardsmen, Assassins, Demons, Monsters, Chaos in general, Eldar, Tyrannid monsters, like Zerg monsters. It's an epic, character creation / leveling, looting, very similar to like a Diablo dungeon grind style game, maybe.
Yeah, I'm struggling to think of like a board game analogy. I think D&D is probably the best one. Like in terms of like an actual physical game that you would play with other humans in front of you. Yeah,
so you play it on a tiered board. There are 3 levels of it at the base game, and the outer is the easiest, and then it gets harder as you go in towards the boss. We played with 1.5 expansions.
Yeah, we added half an expansion in there. We didn't need the full because we only had 4 people.
Yeah, and then the Halls of Terra expansion I think was in there too. It was long.
It was very long.
As games of Talisman also tend to be, so that shouldn't have been too surprising.
I think, though, that there's more push in this game that you can get through than in Talisman, especially if you have wounds. There's less harsh consequences for trying to push it. So we probably could have ended a little bit earlier if some of us had just gone for it, maybe.
Yeah, which we did at the 7-hour mark. We decided, you know what, it's late. We're all just going to Zerg rush this thing.
Yep, whoever makes it to the end makes it. And the strategy worked out. Someone won the game, actually.
Well, I mean, that's good that the game eventually has an end.
Yeah. Unlike Talisman, the middle is not a rote thing. You don't do the same thing every time, JJ.
Oh, that's probably good.
Yeah, there's a deck of cards that you pick from, and each one is basically the final boss of the game, and each one has a special ability for how you fight them, and then also has a special effect on the game. So, like, in the game that we were playing, you got a free power card anytime you drew a threat card of a certain type.
Okay.
So, really changes your strategy of, like, where to play. The Halls of Terror expansion adds another deck, another color deck to pick from instead of just the red, yellow, and blue decks, which are normally there. Is in Talisman, is it just one threat deck?
So when you start getting to some of the Talisman expansions involved, then you start having more decks to pull from in a similar fashion.
Okay. Yeah. So they do that from the base.
They also eventually add on boards that are on the side of the initial board and stuff. It gets pretty complex if you add in a ton of the expansions.
So we did that. The expansion added on a small sideboard to the board, the main base board, which was kind of nice because a lot of the interactions on the sideboard were more situational than fight these monsters, which is more of the base decks. And it made for some interesting alternative mechanics if you wanted to dive into the sideboard, and you could just sort of loop your way around, or, as Andy discovered, get stuck in there accidentally.
Yeah, you have to pay a toll to go to that side of the board. And we didn't read some of the rules a little bit. That could have gotten me out of there a little earlier, but unlike Talisman, in Relic you have missions. So, you have to go to this place to collect this thing.
Yeah, okay.
And then you get 3 completed missions gets you a relic, a.k.a. a talisman.
Similar to how the Warlock quest in Talisman works, but, sounds like it's a bit more complex. You have to do multiple things.
Sure, yeah. So, I accidentally, early on in the game, got a quest that took me to this sideboard, and the sideboard is not hard, but it is a little bit. You need to be leveled a little bit to handle the situations that come up, and I was not. And man, it got stuck in there a little while because I couldn't pay the toll to get out.
Bummer.
Yeah. I will say it was really nice to discover that Relic. If you push it and you want to catch up, you can. Unlike maybe a Talisman, where if you fall behind, you kind of get boned.
Yeah, and Talisman catching up is more about, can you get lucky?
Yeah, so, at one point, I felt really behind, and I went to the middle ring and just fought more monsters and then ended up getting enough loot to catch up. I don't know. How did you feel about the pacing of it, Michael?
I was really impressed by the way that that we all sort of managed to keep at parity. The fact that, while there was some rubber banding during the middle of the game and it was kind of hard to tell who was ahead and who was behind, by the time we got to the end, you and I were in the middle fighting the boss, and I think Andrew and Eric were one square away from doing the same. So we all sort of wound up through totally different paths, all wound up in the same place at the same time by the end.
I think some of us were definitely more equally equipped or less wounded. If Andrew Lee, I think if he had fought the boss one time and lost, I think he was out, maybe 2 times.
Yeah, but I think going into that last run, we were all pretty well above starting health. So, just some bad rolls of the die can deplete you pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's nice, too, because the game has dials instead of piling up tokens like in Talisman.
Mm-hmm.
Ugh. So
it
much
has
better.
long been a failing of Talisman is the number of fiddly little bits that are involved in it.
Yeah, this just mostly has the cards that you have to keep track of in the different piles, but other than that, there's not a lot in the way of tokens and
once you start getting into mutations, you can kind of start to lose track of the bonuses and detriments that you do have. You kind of have to re-add every time.
Yeah, you definitely have to keep a close eye on, at this point in my turn, I can take advantage of this, because otherwise you'll forget and it'll just pass you right by. Or
that, in this type of combat, or in this type of skill check, or in that type of combat, they're all different, and you have different bonuses for each one, and you can only use certain ones. So it's still very much that D&D, like you said, fiddling around. Yeah. Should we get to
the end game?
Unbelievable, believable part?
Yeah, I was told there was a crime committed, Andrew. You said it was a crime.
You have to roll for the monsters in combat.
Okay.
I'm not a particularly strong D6 roller, but
it is well known that Andrew and the D6 don't always get along.
RNGesus is not his homeboy.
I took a character that if I was in strength combat with, I really wouldn't have to roll very hard.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my strategy. Generally becomes my strategy in games with RNG. Find a way to deplete the random numbers factor. But you still have to roll for the monsters. And in Relic, the biggest difference between it and Talisman is that 6s explode, JJ.
Oh, that's a dangerous system. It's really dangerous.
Is it?
I mean, I have played D20-based RPG systems where you can do some really bad things if you roll 20s enough times. So I believe that it is very dangerous, yes.
It's a lot easier to roll a 6 than a 20.
That's what I'm saying.
So we tended to spread it around a little bit, and Michael took the opportunity to beset me with exploding 6s at every opportunity, to the point that up until the end of the game, I said no more. He's not allowed to roll against me again. And I started to catch up, lo and behold. That was probably what you got to roll against me 3 times before we stopped that.
Yeah, I let some of the other guys roll against you instead, because it just seemed a little unfair at that point.
Yeah.
He was cursing you in some way.
It was odd magnetism, I will admit. I was very concerned that there were
underneath
plates,
the table,
on
a voodoo
his
doll, and unbeknownst to you.
So then, to make matters worse, the final boss that we were fighting, you had to fight essentially 4 times in a row, and he got stronger each time. And I would say of the 4 people that went in there, Michael was the best equipped in terms of equipment. I was the most prepared in terms of extra cards and bonuses. I think my strength attacks were much stronger than your willpower attacks.
Oh, for sure.
And you could fight him on anything. So he was fighting him with willpower. I was fighting him with strength. And so, I'm thinking he's the weakest on the first attack. So I've got all these extra cards. Michael, why don't we rotate around when people are fighting the boss, and each person rolls 1 time at least against the player fighting against the boss. So Michael went first to fight as the opposite of me against the boss. To wit, 3 6s? 2 6s on the first one?
I think it was 2 the first time.
2 on the first one. 2 on the first. So I had to burn a little bit,
Yeah.
More than I would like to have had burned on the first go around. Got through that one. Then made the other 2 opponents roll for the second and third combat, which went swimmingly.
Mm-hmm.
No used expendables, etc. And then the rest of the table had the same thought that I had, which was not a good one, which was that Michael then would have to roll the final dice to see if I won the game.
And
Michael had a vested interest in making sure I did not roll those dice.
As though he were somehow magically controlling the outcome of these random dice.
Because he got his second shot at the boss if I did not complete the victory. Which means he had to fight it one time and win. How many times?
So, Andy was looking at, I think all told, his strength count was something like 23, 25.
Somewhere in there. Yeah,
Okay,
I could bump
high.
up to 25 without adding any dice.
Right. And so the boss was looking at, I think, 13 on the table, just in base stat. So before the dice rolls.
No problem. I've got
Roll.
this.
I roll 1
How many
6.
dice does the boss get? Just one?
Well, you start with 1, right?
Right.
And then.
Okay.
Right. So I roll 1 6. That explodes.
Right. That means you roll again and add it, right?
Yes. So I roll a second 6, which explodes.
Yeah.
And then I roll the third 6.
So that's 18 on top of the 13.
And then just drop a 5 on top of it.
Sheesh.
At which point, we all lost it.
I mean, yeah, that's ridiculous.
I think of all the combats against Michael all game, I made it out of one of them without him having exploded a die against me.
The man's hands were hot.
And on the final boss, then I'm down at least 15, I think it was, by the time he finished rolling. But I have this thing that pops me 12 instantly. And then I get a die.
Mm-hmm.
What do I roll, JJ?
Andrew, knowing you, I will say that this story isn't complete unless you roll a 1 here.
Mm-hmm. I didn't win the game.
No.
A crime was committed. I was robbed.
That's a impressively unlucky streak.
Grand theft sorcery.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Board game nights are fun.
Yep.
A good time was had by most.
I had a great time. I scratched the relic / talisman itch for a little bit. We can go back to playing Euros for a little while. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I agree. Sometimes you just need to get in some big, stupid, overly complicated board games, and Talisman and Relic are those.
And it's sorry.
I was just going to say, to be able to say that we finished it, because the last couple of times we've started and half gotten through it once, but to be able to say we played a full game, with an expansion and a half, was really satisfying.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And it scratches that like D&D thing. You don't have to RPG it up,
Yeah, it definitely does.
Well, that's enough about that. That was a Peaks and Valleys night the whole time. Although it was definitely a valley getting home at 4:30 in the morning.
And having to get up at what time?
Kids rolled me out of bed at like 7.
That's not a lot of sleep.
You know what? The Rock gets less sleep than that. So it can't be that bad for you. That guy's yoked.
The Rock has no job except to work out all day and film movies when he's not doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's a drastic reduction of the things that The Rock does, of course, but also I don't believe him that he says he gets less than 3 hours of sleep. That seems impossible.
But then we were back to highs that day because I got to go see Hamilton that night.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah. I am not a soundtrack listener previous to going to see something.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All right. What is your policies on that?
So I typically also will not listen to especially for something like a musical. I'm not going to listen to the whole thing before going. Not because I'm worried about spoilers or whatever, but because I just want to experience it as a whole thing the first time.
Agreed. Michael?
I don't really have an issue with listening to the soundtrack ahead of time. Though I won't, if I'm going to see something that I haven't heard the music for, I won't go out of my way to try and listen to it beforehand. If I've heard it at some point because I've heard it, then that's about as far as I'll take it.
Gotcha.
I definitely know people for this play specifically that they were like, oh, I had to make sure I listened to all the songs beforehand so that I could keep up, as though it was difficult to understand the things that they were saying. Which
I had trouble
found to be ridiculous.
I don't want this to be too much of a spoiler because I know Michael hasn't been yet.
Oh, I've seen it.
Oh, okay. I thought you guys were.
Well, we're going in 2 weeks, but I saw it right around when it opened in New York.
Okay, so 3 years, as in perfect We Were Gamer style, 3 years after people have been talking about Hamilton, let's do a minute on it.
Right on brand.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
I had the only song I had any trouble with was Lafayette.
Yep. Yeah, he has the quickest songs in the show.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It was definitely the fastest moving one for sure.
And it's interesting because listening to the recordings of it afterwards, because I went back to see what I missed in that, they must just be in a studio because they're definitely slower and more enunciated. When they do those recordings, they're definitely not done from a show.
Oh, no, they're always done in the studio.
Yeah.
Yeah, the soundtracks are recorded in a studio for sure. Yeah, they bring tons of people into a room or whatever.
That's an interesting tidbit of information. I loved it. It was fantastic. I'm glad that I experienced the music and the play part at the same time when hearing the music for the first time. That was awesome. It was great. So, peak.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Sunday. Valley. Broke my computer.
Well, okay. But
give a little backstory there.
Yeah, so on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, you can go see. JJ and Michael were very kind. And I think that this is an interesting side story for a lot of people, maybe. Building your own computer, most of the time, is very exciting. And almost all of the time works out. And then you have a computer that you have no company to call when something starts to get wacky.
Yeah, it is the flip side of doing your own stuff, is that you then are forced to become your own IT person.
Yeah. And some IT problems are very easy to diagnose. It won't boot up. Well, is your power supply spinning up? Test it. You know what I mean?
When you press the button, are there lights? Do they flash? Do you hear any sounds? These are the things you can, go by.
Does the motherboard throw a code? That sort of stuff.
And if it does, there's this sweet book where you can just look all that stuff up.
Right. Yeah. So there's a lot of PC problems that is very easy to learn how to do. Much like if you get a shop manual for your car, right? Like if it was built before 2010 or whatever, because now you can't service your own car because codes.
Computers.
Yeah.
My dude, there are apps for codes.
Those are expensive. Have you seen how expensive it is to try and edit your own PMUs and stuff?
Yes, I have such an app for my car. It was quite expensive to buy, but has saved me quite a bit of time going to and from the dealership. So
really?
Yep.
I'm jealous, man.
Nice.
I mean, it was like $70 or something. It was an expensive app.
Yeah. And sometimes in some cars, you have to buy a module too.
Yeah, so I had to buy a Bluetooth thing. You can buy non-Bluetooth versions of this thing for very cheap, that plugs into that OBD2 port in your car.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I bought this Bluetooth one that connects to my phone. It wasn't expensive either, but the app to run with the thing was expensive, of course. But it lets me do all kinds of fancy stuff. I can play with the exhaust limiters and go in there and open up the valve on my exhaust all the way for no good reason.
So you can make your car extra illegal.
Yeah, and like you can reprogram the stuff that I'm using it for mostly is like, oh, I changed the battery in my car. Did you know that the battery is coded specifically to your ECU, and if you don't reprogram it correctly, it won't charge the battery well? Well, I did not know that, and I found that out. And the dealership was like, how about a bunch of money? And I was like, how about no? And so then I went and bought a different kind of battery, and installed it myself and did this programming, which was the app made very easy. It just took quite a bit of time to do it.
Sure.
I guess the transmission rate is slow or something. I don't know.
Well,
anyway,
OBD2 ports have been around for 30 years almost, maybe.
Yeah. You can buy a thing that plugs into that thing and pulls codes from your car, and then look the codes up on Google or whatever for very cheap.
Well, I'm just saying, so I'm not surprised a 30-year-old port doesn't transmit data quickly.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah. That's why USB, right, eventually switched to C, just because they're just transmission limited by the form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Totally.
What were we talking about?
So, Andrew, you were saying that you have to sometimes be your own IT person, and
yeah. So there are some
these problems.
Yeah, right, exactly. So there's some easy problems to diagnose, like I hear a clicking sound while your hard drive's going bad.
Or one of your fans is rubbing on a cable.
Right, exactly. Yeah, there's tons of problems that are easy to solve. And then there's like, okay, I'm getting graphics glitches. That is most likely my video card. But the problem with the video card could be a multitude of problems. It could be a problem related to the video card, like power supply, cables, all sorts of stuff. And there's almost no way to identify those things except for trial and error.
Yeah, that is the most unfortunate part, is that a lot of cases, there's like, here are 5 things that could be wrong. You have no choice. It's very difficult to guess which one it is, so you're just going to have to probably try them all.
The beautiful thing about the modern age of technology is that I was able to tete-a-tete with these two, and we had the trio of problem solvers going at it. And the best thing I think that we could all come up with was, heat?
Yeah. I think the numbers you were showing on your graphics card at idle were abnormally high.
And heat's an easy one too, because you can find software that'll give you the heat of various components while they're running.
Right, and you can test heat easily by pinging your fans up and then seeing if the graphics card continues to have the problem.
Right.
So in order to alleviate some heat, I took my case apart because it can come down to a frame, basically, where it's just 4 beams, a front and a back, and then the case is exposed. So that way I could dissipate some more heat, run the fans a little bit higher, and see if maybe... I know these things are... They're temperature limited to like 90 C, I think. But I wasn't getting above 70.
I don't remember what the thermal shutdown level is by default, but yeah, it's high. And 90 C is that's pretty hot.
Yeah. I don't know. Has anybody
for something that you're not overclocking, that's working really, really hard.
Has either of you had a PC that just runs the graphics card into the ground on heat ever? Like maybe a pre-built one or something?
My laptop is really bad on temperature control. I had to install a third-party fan controller that pretty much runs at full whenever it's turned on.
Yeah, I think laptops are the ones that are pretty notorious for being super hot all the time. You would hear stories about people having the laptop burn their legs or whatever, from them playing World of Warcraft on it or trying to in the old days. But I don't think any PC that I've used seriously has ever done that to me.
So in the middle of testing this process, I like I said, I took the case apart. We were testing it. I wasn't getting graphics glitches with the fans running up, so I started to put my case back together. And I clipped the fan with the case because the fan is very close to the side. And again, Instagram, you can see my new weighted fans.
The fan is close to the side?
Yeah, it's really close to the side. Mm-hmm.
Is it on the back side of the case?
my motherboard sits on the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And so then the card is tilted up on the left side from the front of the case. And it's literally like
Oh, I see. So
video
it's
card case
Okay.
side.
Got it. Okay. Your case is lying on the side from what I would usually think of as the typical tower configuration.
Right.
then.
My motherboard is horizontal, not vertical like most motherboards.
Okay.
Which I've
Is
never
there
understood because that puts a heck of a lot of weight just hanging in the air if you have a tower cooler on your CPU.
They're built to hang that way.
I know, but it's extra stress.
Yeah, it is. But I think it's typically fine. The question I was going to say is there another slot, like another PCIe slot that you could like click it up one?
I mean,
Just like move the card, from like the one slot to the one higher up, like closer to the center so that more air could get underneath it.
no, it can't move.
Okay.
Well, you've already got a smaller case than a normal tower size, right?
It's an ITX case.
Mini ITX?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the board I have only fits two cards, so since I have a double card, that's it. It can only go in one spot.
Yeah. Are there two physical slots for the card? Like
Yeah, but the way that
plugins on the motherboard.
this is so boring, but
You're saying that it won't fit out. It won't fit out the back if you don't put it where it is.
yeah, right.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, so
Bummer. You lost a fan.
I lost a fan. So now my fans have to run even higher to keep the temperature from getting insanely hotter, and I don't know that we're able to test any other problem until I get this fixed. So
Do you get a nice buzz now from the unbalanced fan?
I took the unbalanced fan out. I just clipped it out. Like
So I looked at that picture again, and it's not just one blade that you lost. You lost two or three.
I think it's like 4.
Okay, that makes it a lot harder to use my ghetto balancing solution of just like break off fans
Michael,
on the other side.
I don't think Michael
to, like,
heard the
balance it.
solution because I think we were texting back and forth. But to tell him what your balancing solution was.
So Andrew was like, well, I can't use this fan anymore. I'm like, you probably could. Like, it's going to be unbalanced, but like there's a decent chance that the clearance is enough that it's not going to cause a problem depending on how snugly mounted it is. Andrew was like, but like it's going to wobble and stuff. And I was like, well, if you just want to fix the balancing problem, just break blades off on the other side. Perfectly balanced now.
Then he saw the picture.
Then I had not. I had seen the picture before and then hadn't thought about it, and then I saw it again, and it would require you to break off nearly all of the blades to balance it that way. So yeah, never mind.
So I clipped out the bad fan. I applied some new thermal paste to the card because I had to take the entire radiator off to get the fan out, which I'll probably have to do again. I think I've found a replacement fan. I called Asus and they're like, nah, but I think I've found a replacement from China probably. The problem being that I probably won't get here for a month.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's how China stuff works.
Alternatively, I could just go down to Fry's and get a liquid cooler, like a hybrid cooler, you know?
Or buy one of those off Amazon.
Yeah.
Or wherever.
Yeah, a hybrid cooler or a new cooler, like an Arctic cooler or something, and then switch to a different case.
Oh, I see, because there's no space for that cooler in the case you have currently.
Any other cooler other than the stock one is not going to fit. So I'm really weighing the dilemma of like wait a month for a $20 part from China or buy up, $70, $80 worth of new case and a new cooler and get it done immediately. I don't know. PCs, y'all. PCs.
Yeah.
I'm still in that valley. Please, somebody get me out of it with what you've been up to.
I have seen a few more credits of the game variety this time.
It's so productive compared to me.
So yeah, I finally finished the latest game in the Layton series.
That was the mobile one? Or
yes,
the woman?
It was the
or...
mobile one that they then ported to 3DS.
And it's his
daughter? That was always the plan. Yes.
That's right.
It is his daughter that is the main character, and he has disappeared throughout the game. It's not... That storyline isn't part of the game, but you just sort of know that he's not in the picture over the course of this game.
Did you find him at the end? Spoilers?
No, you don't find him at the end, but they leave it open for there to be another game, and it feels very much like there is going to be one because the game ends, the game kind of goes along, and it definitely felt at times a lot more like a mobile game than one that had originally been planned out for the 3DS. And then you get to the very end and giant twist, the end.
Unearned? I mean,
totally. It was so there was the twist that was built into the storyline, which, having played a lot of these games and this one having been a little more simplified for mobile, was pretty easy to see coming by the time you got up to the point of it happening. But the one at the end, there was no telegraphing it. It was just like, this is the direction we're going with this.
Man.
I know that the Layton, from my time with the early Laytons and yours recently, the puzzles have gotten more varied. They've done a better job of making the game probably keep fans of the series engaged. But like, the anime style writing in the first one seems very overproduced, and I worry that a twist like this is just kind of like, come back and play more puzzles versus actually being well done. Did you feel cheated at the end? It's weird to talk about Layton in terms of writing, but like, there's got to be some part of the people coming back to do for that part of it, right?
Yeah, I don't know if cheated is the right word. I definitely didn't enjoy this game as much as I have enjoyed some of the other ones, because I feel like in the past games, they've done a real good job with storytelling. And so this one, to me, the fact that it was very episodic until the very last chapter had me feeling almost a sense of, okay, when are we going to get on with this? And then it got to the last chapter, and it started to get a little bit more interesting, and I was more engaged with the very last chapter than the previous ones. And then the catch at the very end just made me... It definitely caught me, but it also kind of annoyed me that it felt like they were saying, the next one's going to be a real game with a true storyline. Thanks for playing.
Does that imply non-mobile?
I don't know. I don't know if the plan is non-mobile or if they're going to try the dual release again with an eye towards more mobile fan base. But it made me want a richer story for the game that I had just finished. And it just sort of rubbed the point home that I didn't get it.
I don't like the sound of that.
Yeah, that kind of sucks.
A little bit. And I was already a little on the fence about how I felt about the game, and so that definitely didn't help. That being said, depending on how they decide to do another game, if they pick up because there's one completely unanswered question and then the big twist. And if they pick up and run with either of those storylines as a full thread, it could be interesting.
I mean, also they could just pick up one of those threads and do an episodic thing for a while again and then have a revelation at the end.
Right, which could be, just as frustrating again.
I'm unconfident.
Yeah, so I will give them the benefit of the doubt only because, on balance, it's 6 games that I really liked versus one that I was kind of meh about. So they've still got a lot of positive marks that they'd have to, a lot of goodwill that they'd have to erase.
You're a good man, Charlie Brown.
Before I say I'm done with you.
Nice. So what's the follow-up then?
Well, out of a game that I felt like didn't have enough story, I have dove back into the JRPG story pool for some Trails in the Sky second chapter. Yes. I know you've been waiting, JJ.
I have to jump in and take credit here for the fact that you guys are using the full titles.
I don't know if we have the time not to.
Sorry. You guys commiserate it. But how far into it are you?
I'm not terribly far into it. I really just started up over the weekend. So I finished the training mission, and I'm into the very first part of the story.
Yeah, it definitely, with the crazy ending that happens at the end of the first chapter, you would think this would just pick up and be like, oh man, stuff is kicking off, but no, not quite.
Well, I kind of expected that in the sense of some time would have passed between the end of the last game and the beginning of the next one, because a lot of times when you play a sequel or the next game in a series, that's kind of how it goes. There's a gap. They spend the first part of the game filling you in on what has happened. Not this game. This game is literally the last game ended on a blackout. This game, you wake up the next morning.
Right. So there, it shows you some of that time spent in between instead, right? Rather than just telling you about it.
Right, you play through some of that downtime.
Well, I am super excited for you to get into some of the stuff that happens in this game. I think after playing the first game and getting to that ending, I had no choice but to immediately start playing the second game because I wanted to know what happened. And then it took me a little bit to get going in the second game, I think. So I'm interested to see how you take to it. Do you remember all? Because you start off at a relatively high level, or at least something somewhat comparable to where you would have ended the first game. So did you remember all of the stuff with your orbments and how to make the lines and do all that stuff?
Some of it, yes. So there is a file carryover mechanic that if you are between level 35 and 40, it carries your level forward from the previous game. If you're under 35, it bumps you to 35. If you're over 40, it drops you to 40. So you start somewhere in between there. I think I started at level 39. So all the arts and crafts I sort of remembered. They restart you with the orbments. If you remember, there's been an upgrade to orbal technology. So you have to start from the beginning with collecting all your orbments again.
That's right. Okay.
Which is kind of nice, because it's a setback, but it definitely makes you feel like it's the beginning of a new adventure. And you have the perspective, they set you up with, this one has the potential to be more powerful than your old one. So by the end of the game, you will surpass where you were at the end of the last game.
Yeah, it really, man. Thinking about some of the stuff that happens later in that game, it goes some places.
It kind of answers a question I was going to have, which is, it's weird to me that they have to do a training mission in a series of games. I know they have to, right? Because every game is unique and there's mechanical changes in between games where they're like, this is better this way. At least in this instance, they were selling you on the fact that, you need a training mission because everything's not the same as when you left the last game. There's this story reason that things have changed for you, because I was thinking if you played these all back to back, you're going to really be bored by just, why am I doing a training mission?
Well, the nice thing about it is that at the beginning, it gives you the option. Do you want to go through a full training, or do you just want to learn the mechanic that's been added for this game? So if you're playing them right on the heels of each other, you don't have to go through, this is how attack works, and this is how move works. You can just go through, here's the new chain craft system. Okay, you've got it. Move on with the story.
Nice.
Yeah, so it was definitely a nice touch. And there's a good there's a good story reason why you're training again too, so it feels organic.
Yeah, the character has a pretty decent justification for being on a training type thing. So
I'm shocked at how well written these sound.
I will say, being several more games into the series than Michael, I am astounded by things that come up like 4 games later that it turns out have been hinted at in previous games. I don't know who or what has been written by these companies beforehand in like some kind of lore Bible that handles the entire universe or something, but there is stuff that they specifically mention names and places and events in the games that Michael is playing and has played that come up again 4 games, 6 games down the road. And
Crazy.
you're like, oh, this is that place that they were talking about here, and those things happened here in the past back then. It's very impressive.
It's really what game series should be in that way.
You know, I mean, when all of those things take place in the same universe and the same world, why wouldn't those things be interconnected like that? That's how real life sort of works, right?
Is this the Game of Thrones of Japanese games?
I don't think Game of Thrones is a good example, but it is a lot of interconnected stuff. Although Game of Thrones may be in the fact that there are so many parts of it that maybe are never going to come out in English. So that's
it. It definitely takes, I think, a risk on the part of the game developers, because to plot something out that ambitious, you have to, at least up front, you have to have banked on having a good enough product that you're going to want people are going to want to come back to it.
Yeah.
Right. You can plan out this ambitious storyline over multiple games and multiple series, but if the first 1 or 2 don't catch people and have them wanting more, then it's all going to come to nothing.
And you get this problem then of, well, okay, so this, Trails in the Sky series is the first part, and then there's a couple games that are unreleased in English, and then there's the Cold Steel series, and then there's supposedly some new series after those games that's going to start someday. And, you get this case of like, well, someone's like, well, where can I start? Like, I don't want to play 15 games to get into it, right? So
there's that too.
They have to build kind of on-ramping portions into the story somehow in order to let people catch up. And, then does that mean, well, like, do we have to change characters? Do we have to leave behind the people that people have come to love, through these other games? And, like, then that's very risky, because essentially you're just throwing away a bunch of the goodwill,
Yep.
So, yeah, they're really incredible games. I recommend people check them out for sure if you have not.
JJ?
Yeah.
Are you also playing an RPG?
I have been playing dipping my toe in a little bit to the Magic the Gathering Arena game.
That's not an RPG.
No, not really.
So wait, is this cards or is this something else?
Yeah, it's cards. This is online Magic against humans.
Online Magic has been a thing for quite a long time. Is this? I mean, I haven't followed this scene. Is it new? This new?
Yes, somehow. This thing is in beta, I guess. I signed up on their website and they sent me an invite code, so I jumped in. But it lets you play Magic against people, and it's apparently the newest set of sets. And then I guess the thing that's new here is they allow you to do draft Magic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Against other people. I haven't done that yet because, spoiler alert, the costs are kind of high.
Real life costs, right? They probably are charging money.
Yeah, so the game doesn't have... There is a way to get through into the drafting thing with just coins, but I don't have enough of those. So I'm forced to play regular constructed play, and since my decks aren't good, That's very difficult, and you don't really get a lot of free cards through that way, so it kind of is taking a while to build up a deck. I wanted to get your guys' thoughts quickly here, maybe about the system that this uses as opposed to what Hearthstone does. So in Hearthstone, right, if you get a duplicate card, you get dust, and you can use the dust to create cards of the various types. It just costs more dust in the end. This does something a little bit different. When you open your card packs, there's a chance that you will open a wild card. And the wild cards are of various types. You get common, uncommon, rare, and I think the top rarity in Magic is called mythic. And you can transform a wild card in your collection into any other card of that type.
Huh.
So while you're opening your packs, you'll see, common wild card, uncommon wild card, or whatever, as you go along. They're not like super common to show up, but you do see them eventually. And then you can then go, okay, well, I want to create a deck. Let's find a deck list over here because I don't know anything about Magic the Gathering anymore. And go, okay, which of these cards are the good ones here that I can craft out of the commons and uncommons and the rares and whatever that I have. Of course, you don't have enough to make a good tier 1 deck out of the gate. That's not how anything works, right? They do give you some pre-constructed decks that you can fiddle around with and play, so that's kind of what I've been doing. But the wild card system seems kind of cool. It's like, hey, you get a token that lets you get one of any legendary that you want, essentially, in Hearthstone, right?
It's kind of like the Overwatch box that you're going to get for the anniversary. Here, you get a legendary.
Yeah, it's like, but you have the chance to open another bonus legendary of any type, right? So you can open the legendary normally, right? There might just be a legendary card in there.
Sure.
And then I think there's another system that gives you additional wild cards from this thing called the Vault. And I guess the Vault works on after you've opened a certain number of packs. The Vault, it opens and it just gives you a whole slew of wild cards of each type. And then you can just do that over and over as you obtain packs. Yeah, so it was a pretty different system. I'm still kind of feeling it out a little bit.
I think if it existed in conjunction with Dust, it would be really cool.
Yeah, so I can imagine the system being kind of annoying where you craft a bunch of cards, and then you play for a while, and then you realize you want to do some other stuff, and now you have no wild cards, and there's nothing you can make.
Unless you could combine hey, 4 common wild cards, you can have a rare wild card.
Yeah, that seems like something that might benefit, or whatever the rarity distribution Magic wants to have, right?
Yeah.
I think cards are 7 to a pack instead of 5 in Hearthstone. So the numbers work a little different, probably.
Right. That's cool.
But yeah, that's been cool.
Awesome.
Have you beaten BattleTech yet?
I have not gotten to the end of the story campaign, but I have been amassing assault mechs to try and be able to field an entire lance of assaults. I'm pretty close. I think I have 3 out of 4. I have 2 of one mech, but I don't want to use 2 of that mech.
You are further in the game than me. Is that actually good?
I've certainly won missions with 3 assaults and 1 heavy.
But is that... I mean... Can we talk about the general design of the game for a second? I know we're going to run out of time at the end of this, but one of the things that I noticed, I actually had a really unlucky day a couple weeks ago, or maybe a week ago or so, before my heat/computer problems. I had a day where I couldn't finish a mission. I tried it 3 times, and something would come up, I had to go do something with the kids, or I had to do dinner, or something happened, and I had to restart the mission again because I couldn't finish it. And I really used that as an opportunity to learn the game, and I sincerely don't understand at a certain point why you'd ever take a light mech, and that feels weird and bad.
You finally got to the point that I was at a long time ago, where you were trying to convince me that light mechs had a purpose, and I was sort of not really.
See, so they should have a purpose, though.
Well, I'm glad that you feel that way and that the fiction agrees with you. The fiction claims that there are purposes for them.
And I think it's the failing of the way the game is designed, where you get 4 mechs. You don't get 4 mech points. You get 4 mechs, right? Like, it's not like, in every other designed, like, tabletop designed game, you get 400 points and you get to bring a whole bunch of lights or a whole bunch of heavy or not a lot of heavies, etc.
Sure. So what you want is the skirmish system that exists in this game, where you can set limits and you have to work within those limits and feel the lance of a certain amount of value.
It would just be so much more valuable in those missions where you have 8 enemies to say, well, I brought 12 light mechs. But I'm at the point, though, that I'm just coring mechs out. Like, every single time I take somebody with high spirits, I do a precision shot, and that light mech doesn't last 1 round of me shooting at it, no matter how much evasion it has.
Yeah, it's time to move on to more difficult missions, Andrew. I did my first 5 skull mission this past week, and let me tell you, facing down 6 to 7 assault mechs is not easy. So, the game definitely gets harder. I think some of that is built into the way they want it to be like an RPG where you get progressively more cool and more powerful, right?
Yeah, but they have this really cool initiative system where you really want to have mechs that have initiative 4 or 5, but that initiative system is basically probably only going to be good after a certain point in the game for skirmish mode. Like, it was really important early on when you were light and medium mech territory. Actually bringing a few lights was key to bringing down the heavier mechs quickly. But now it's kind of like, well, I'll just race to the bottom and get my assault mechs and just sit at 1, take the pounding, and then win the game.
I still disagree. There's a high benefit to be able to go before people, and the skill that allows you to have 2 initiative in an assault mech is insanely valuable for that reason. So that's a mech warrior perk. So, like, you have to level your guys in a certain direction. That ability is super valuable, but then again, so are some of the other ones. So, it just sort of it gives you a reason to want to put certain pilots in certain mechs then at that point.
I have started doing more story missions and harder missions where I thought I was going to make it through the game with like 7 or 8 mech warriors, but man, everybody is injured all the time now.
Yeah, I think I'm down to a pretty hardy crew of like 7 or 8, because later in the game you start getting mods to like your cockpit and stuff that help you resist injuries a little bit. But I certainly don't have enough of those for all the mechs that I run, since those things end up in the bay for several amounts of time and got to pay those bills.
Have you run into any of the Kickstarter backer pilots?
Yeah, I have a couple on my team, actually.
I think I have Adrenaline and one other one, but their backstory... Did they let the Kickstarter backers write their own backstories?
I think so, or at least some level.
That sounds fun.
I have someone on my team who is named GV, and his backstory is hilariously long and complicated, but his stats are good, so whatever. After the second Kickstarter backer pilot I hired, I stopped reading their stories because I was like, this is literally a novel. Yeah, it's like fan fiction as well at some level.
Oh, it's definitely like at age 1, he was born on the planet blah blah blah, and like you read the normal backer pilot, and the normal pilots have like he went to an academy, and then he ran with a pirate crew. You're like, cool, that's all I need to know about this guy. And then you get the Kickstarter ones, and it's like his parents left him, and he went to learn how to become a hacker, and
Yeah, some of them are a lot more than others for sure. But I like how there are so many different voices for all the mech warriors, and I've enjoyed hiring random people and seeing what the character's voice is like, because there are so many different ones.
Yeah.
And there's just some really fun lines that some of those people have.
I wish those extra traits did something, like, they worked with a pirate crew, like those traits that they mentioned. I wish those did something.
They do on occasion show up in the random events that happen.
Oh, is that what they're for?
Maybe. I haven't seen like all of them show up, but I've definitely seen a case where some of those random events reference a thing that one or more of my
I definitely only get one or three like random. I keep getting the same random events. Is that because maybe they're gated or?
I don't know. There aren't a giant pool of them though. I definitely have seen some of them several times.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I still enjoy it. I don't know if I'll be able to play much right now. It really spins the graphic card up, and so I have to run the fan at like 85-90%, and that's really annoying. So might have to wait until I figure out this repair. Anyway, yeah. I don't know, man.
Peaks and valleys.
Peaks and valleys. If you want to tell us about your PC peaks and valleys, let's try that one 5 times fast.
I'm not gonna.
Okay, don't do it then. Where should they go?
Well, you could go to our email and send us a line at podcast@weweregamers.com. You could jump on the Facebook page or the Twitter or our Instagram. Especially check out that pretty good photo that Andrew posted on there. If you want to see a fan in distress.
It's hilarious. It's fine. Like, I know you want to say hilarious. That it is hilarious, and I appreciate
it. Is kind of hilarious.
Yeah, I can appreciate that it's funny.
It is funny to me that you broke it so well right down at the base.
I really don't. I could
just like clip that blade right off, just like whoop. Anyway, and those are at We Were Gamers on all of those platforms. And you can leave us reviews on iTunes and Google Play. We really appreciate that stuff.
Yeah. Your opinions on looking at fan ratings?
Yeah.